Most people know Kentucky from a chicken recipe and a horse race. Maybe bourbon if they're feeling fancy, but that's like knowing the ocean from a glass of salt water. Because the real Kentucky produced both presidents of a civil war and then watched its own families try to kill each other at the dinner table. It built an empire on the backs of men who breathed coal dust until their lungs turned black. Then wrote a folk song about it that became the anthem of every labor movement in America. It rained meat from the sky in 1876, and to this day, nobody can fully explain why. And its governors still have to swear, hand on Bible, that they have never fought a duel with deadly weapons. This is the entire history of Kentucky, and nobody's going to tell it to you over a bucket of fried chicken. So let's go back. Way back. 14,000 years ago, long before anyone called this place Kentucky, people were already here. They followed mammoths and giant bison through a narrow mountain pass we now call the Cumberland Gap. They were not just passing through. They stayed. They built. They buried their dead in the rich soil along the rivers, and they carved their stories into the rock. For thousands of years, nations, including the Cherokee, Shawnee, Chickasaw, and Yuchi, called this land home. And what they called it tells you everything. The Wyandot named it Ka-ten-ta-te, meaning the land of tomorrow. The Shawnee called it Kain-tuk-e at the head of the river. Nobody agrees on which name stuck, but they all agreed on one thing. This land was worth something. Then the frontier came knocking. In 1774, James Herod built the first permanent white settlement. A year later, Daniel Boone hacked a road through the Cumberland Gap called the Wilderness Road, and within 25 years, 200,000 settlers poured through it like water through a cracked dam. Kentucky became the 15th state in 1792. It was the first state west of the original 13 colonies. And almost immediately, it became a contradiction. See, Kentucky sat right on the fault line between North and South. Its economy ran on slave labor. Its rivers flowed toward northern commerce. Its culture leaned southern, but its geography said otherwise. The state was bordered by 7 neighbors, more than almost any other, and that meant everybody wanted a piece of it. If you are learning things you never expected, you should consider subscribing to the channel now. It takes 1 second, and it helps stories like this reach more people. So then came the war that didn't just divide the nation, it divided dinner tables. Here's a fact that sounds made up, but isn't. Kentucky is the only state in American history to produce both wartime presidents. Abraham Lincoln, born in a one-room cabin in Hodgenville, led the Union. Jefferson Davis, born in Fairview just 100 miles away, led the Confederacy. Same state, same soil, opposite sides of the bloodiest war in American history. And it wasn't just the presidents. Kentucky tore itself apart from the inside. Around 100,000 men fought for the Union. Between 25,000 and 40,000 fought for the Confederacy. Nearly 24,000 of the Union soldiers were black men who enlisted to fight for their own freedom. The Crittenden brothers became generals on opposite sides. Henry Clay's grandsons split between blue and gray. Lincoln's own brother-in-law, Benjamin Helm, commanded a Confederate brigade called the Orphan Brigade. He died at the Battle of Chickamauga in 1863. When news reached the White House, Lincoln reportedly wept. Mary Todd Lincoln's own family was shattered. All but one of her 7 brothers and half-brothers fought against the Union that her husband was trying to hold together. Frankfort was the only Union state capital to be captured by Confederate troops. Kentucky officially declared neutrality, but Lincoln knew better. He said that to lose Kentucky is nearly the same as to lose the whole game. The war ended. The killing didn't. Along the Tug Fork of the Big Sandy River, where Kentucky meets West Virginia, two families had been nursing grudges since the Civil War. The Hatfields on the West Virginia side, the McCoys on the Kentucky side. What started with wartime bushwhacking and a disagreement over a stolen hog turned into the most famous family feud in American history. There was a forbidden romance between Rosanna McCoy and John Hatfield that scandalized both clans. There was an election day brawl in 1882 that ended with 3 McCoy brothers tied to pawpaw bushes and shot dead. And on New Year's night in 1888, a group of Hatfields set fire to the McCoy family cabin, killing 2 of Randolph McCoy's children and bludgeoning his wife nearly to death. It got so bad that the governors of West Virginia and Kentucky threatened to send their militias to invade each other's states. Over a family grudge. Let that sink in. The feud finally ended with a public hanging in Pikeville in 1890. A man named Ellison Mounts, who some said was forced into the violence, reportedly cried out on the gallows, "They made me do it. The Hatfields made me do it." But as one war cooled, another was heating up underground. By the early 20th century, eastern Kentucky had become coal country. Companies moved in, carved open the mountains, and built entire towns around the mines. Company houses, company stores, company rules. Miners could not spend their wages anywhere else. They could not join a union without being fired. They could not complain without being evicted. In 1931, with the Depression crushing the economy, the Harlan County Coal Operators Association cut miners' wages by 10%. The miners had nothing left to lose, so they struck. What followed was nearly a decade of violence known as the Harlan County War. On May 5, 1931, the Battle of Evarts erupted, a 30-minute firefight on a rural highway that left 3 mine deputies and 1 miner dead. The National Guard was called in. Miners were beaten, blacklisted, and evicted with their families. Sheriff J.H. Blair made it clear whose side he was on, and it was not the men breathing coal dust 12 hours a day. His deputies and company thugs roamed the hollers like an occupying army. During all of this, a miner's wife named Florence Reese tore a page from a wall calendar and wrote the words to a song while her husband hid from armed men searching their home. She set it to an old Baptist hymn. The song was called "Which Side Are You On?" It became the anthem of a generation. They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. She was not wrong. The 21st century brought something the coal companies never could: silence. The mines began closing, not because of one president or one policy, but because natural gas got cheap, machines replaced men, and the seams ran thin. The number of miners employed in Harlan County fell from over 3,000 in 1988 to fewer than 1,000 by 2014. No unionized mines remain in the state today. And into that silence came something worse. The opioid epidemic hit eastern Kentucky like a slow-moving flood. The same isolation that once protected moonshiners now hid pill mills. In Clay County alone, doctors prescribed 2.2 million doses of hydrocodone in a single year, for a county of 21,000 people. That works out to roughly 150 doses per person. Kentucky became one of the top 10 most affected states by the opioid crisis, with overdose death rates 50% above the national average. Appalachian counties were the hardest hit. with opioid use disorder rates reaching nearly 18% of the adult population. But here's the thing about Kentucky. It doesn't stay down. This is a state where Mammoth Cave stretches over 400 miles underground, the longest cave system on the planet, where more than 10 million barrels of bourbon age in warehouses right now, 2 for every person who lives there, and 95% of all the bourbon in the world comes from this one state. Where Bourbon County, the very place that gave the drink its name, was historically dry. You can't make that up. This is the state where 2 sisters in Louisville wrote the Happy Birthday song, where the Louisville Slugger was born after a player broke his bat and a local woodworker said, "I can fix that," where Middlesboro is the only city in America built inside a meteor crater. Muhammad Ali grew up on the streets of Louisville. Abraham Lincoln was born in a one-room cabin in the hills. Loretta Lynn came out of Butcher Hollow in Paintsville with nothing but a voice and a story. They all came from the same dirt. Kentucky has been exploited, divided, flooded with pills, and dismissed as flyover country. Its people have been called hillbillies by people who could not survive a single winter in those hollers, and they are still here. The bluegrass still grows. The bourbon still ages. The mountains do not move. Kentucky does not care about your stereotypes, and honestly, neither do the people who call it home. If you found this fascinating, please subscribe for more stories like this. Tell us in the comments which state you want uncovered next. As always, we'll see you in the past.